All right, welcome back to KM6LYW Radio. Hey, this is the show where we talk about amateur radio with an emphasis on data modes, sending information back and forth. Not really talking on the speaker mic, but modems and email and keyboard to keyboard stuff. Hey, we're going to do a radio spotlight today. I haven't done this yet, so maybe this might be the first in the series, but we're going to talk about the Yaesu 991 and how to configure it for data modes. We're going to do that this time on KM6LYW Radio. All right, welcome back. I'm going to keep doing the bumper music gag. Times are tough. We can't afford real bumper music. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and put this guy up here. Keep him nice and safe. We can't afford real bumper music, so that's the best we can do here. So, like I said, let's talk about the Yaesu 991. I've got one turned on here. I'm going to make myself a whole lot smaller. This is the Yaesu 991. This radio has been around a long time. It comes in two variants. There's a 991 and there's a 991A. The only difference, besides one letter, what is this one? This is the FT-991. So the A actually has a scope that runs independently of the receiver. Normally, with the 991, this is the older one. You have to press a sweep button to actually see the view meter or scope information happen there. So I got this 991 used. I think this is like third hand. I usually buy used radios, just that way you can buy more radios if they're cheaper if you get them used. So I'm always looking at the ham websites, and the 991's no exception. We got this used. I had a lot of issues, I'll be honest, getting this radio on, in comparison to, like this ICOM 73A, 7300, the 705. Those are a little easier. Those are actually SDR radios, right? So there's a CPU really interpreting the RF and converting that to audio, doing all the different modes. Where with the 991, it's just a little more old school, for better or worse. It still has an analog type of receiver. It's not completely DSP or signal processor. And maybe that's why it's a little harder to configure. There's a few more knobs you got to tweak. There's levels you got to be just right in order for data modes to really work. So, right now this thing is in Digipi mode. It is doing APRS stuff. In fact, you can tell because not only because of the frequency, but we got the Digipi down here. Digipi is hooked up to this, and that's what's going to be doing all of our digital modes today. If you want to know more about the Digipi, check out Krager.org/Digipi, and you can get a copy of that SD card. The SD card is packed with a bunch of digital modes, like all the modes that we talk about here today. And on this channel are packed into that SD card, and it's a bootable image that you can put in a Raspberry Pi and hook up to your radio, and you get access to every data mode that you can think of, and that's not really exaggerating. I honestly can't think of any more we can do. All right, so back to the 991. So if you're already familiar with this, it's got a pretty standard menu setup. Some of these are self-explanatory. Other things you need the manual for. There are about a dozen things, honestly, that you need to change to get this to work. I've got them listed here. This is for the shortest attention span version. So what is this, a dozen? I don't know what we got here. We got this many things that we genuinely need to change on this radio. And we're just going to start at the top and work our way down and kind of explain why maybe we need to tweak these. Maybe dynamically we need to change some values depending on what modes we're using, what the conditions are like. So let's talk about these one at a time here. So up at the top, you'll notice on this radio, if the value is in blue, so I just hit the menu button here to bring up this menu. Make sure you guys can replicate this. And the value is blue. That means it's like a system default. That's a firmware default. Now you can reset your radio, and I've done this a few times by holding down the F key and then turning the radio on with the power button over here, and it'll reset everything. You lose all your memories, you lose all your configuration items. But instead of doing a reset, just go back and set all the volumes to their blue colors, and then you get their original defaults. So, I'm starting with number 1 here, and I'm going to use the multi-channel control knob. I don't know, I just made up that name. And I'm going to scroll down until I see something that is white. So the dimmer, TFT, I changed that obviously because it's white. And if you're going to film one of these radios, you really got to turn down the the TFT on these for these webcams to work right. So I did in fact change the dimmer. That's the panel dimmer, but you guys don't need to change that. In fact, just make it full blast, especially if you're going to be outside. So I'm scrolling through these. All of these are system defaults. All of these are system defaults. Oh, and we get the first two. We got menu number 28 and menu number 29. This is the RS-232 speed and select. Now this is for the hardware serial port on the back. Generally speaking, I change the serial port rates to 38400. That's as high as it'll go on these. Just remember, if you change that to go back in whatever software you're using, make sure it uses that baud rate. So these aren't that critical, the baud rate stuff. So we're going to keep going. I think the next one is menu item 31. No, that was the cat rate again, the baud rate. So the cat rate 31. Again, this is up to you guys if you want to change the baud rate. Let's get to the important stuff. Like 38 is mic scan resume. You guys don't care about that. That's if you're just scanning. That was a convenience thing for me. What else do we got? I think when we get up to 62, item 62, that's when it really gets important for digital modes on this rig. All right, so item number 62, data mode needs to be others. It generally needs to be others. The options are PSK. I don't even know why it says PSK. Maybe you can help me out there, but you have to say others here in order to get this to work. The next one is other DI displacement. I guess that's what that means. So since we're using other type, the displacement needs to be 1500 hertz off of the dial frequency. Now this is really common for digital modes. I think it's common for CW too, or modulated CW. So the dial frequency is here, and then your tone needs to happen at about 1500 hertz off of your dial frequency. And this is the complete width of your signal, right? So right in the center there. So 1500 is where we want to be there, and that's definitely a must. The shift, the other shift needs to be 1500 hertz as well to match that. Some people make this data cut, low cut frequency. Now the options, are 100 hertz. I just turned it off completely. This is where we kind of roll off the EQ for the high side and roll off the EQ for the low side. So it's a little dimmer on the edges of the band. But for data modes, I want to see the whole spectrum, and I want to see a flat equalization for the entire audio waveform that's coming in. I don't want to have an equalization on that at all. So I turn the high cut and the L cut off, and I'll say that there. And I don't worry about the curves since it's off anyway. That's the high cut is off. And let's keep going. Data port select, we want to make sure that's a USB cable in the back. So when we send data, we're actually talking about the audio information that we're sending between, in this case, the Raspberry Pi, the Digipi, and the radio. So the data is that audio, the actual audio that's modulated into RF by the radio. And that needs to be the USB port. Now, option, I've done this before. It could be data. I guess that's the data, serial data on the back. I don't know. It needs to be USB in any event, so I can say okay there. Let's keep going. And you're going to find lots of how-tos on the internet, and a lot of them will repeat what I'm saying here, but other ones will conflict a little bit. Like I said, for the high cut and the low cut, you're going to see some conflicts there. So let's keep going down. So the FM packet port select is going to be USB. This is going to be for like your 1200 baud stuff, like for APRS. You need to make sure the FM packet port select is USB. I don't know why they couldn't make it all one setting. I don't know, maybe you'd have different data, maybe you'd be using the speaker mic for APRS. I just can't think of a reason why they have two menu items. And the defaults for these aren't USB, right? That's the whole point of getting this radio. FM packet transmit gain. This was an important one. If you're a digipeater, or you're transmitting on APRS or maybe AX.25 at 1200 baud, the output, the TX output on this is just ginormous. So this goes up between 0 and 100, okay? I had to set it down to 4 in order to get a reasonable volume level at a nearby digipeater a few miles away. So if it's running Direwolf somewhere else, you can kind of watch the volume levels. So this is completely overdriving on transmit. The audio is completely overdriving on transmit, way too loud. So let's set that all the way down to 4 or 5. Mess with that a little bit. And then kind of listen to it on your HT if you're transmitting packets. See if your HT sounds overdriven or not, and see if the volume's about the same as other APRS digipeters in your area. So that's a good way to dial in the FM packet transmit gain. That's number 078. And that might be it. Now, yeah, I think that is it. So that's all of them. So the big important ones here, you guys, I think if you're doing HF modes, are the starting with number 62 and going down through number 50 here. I don't know why, or I'm sorry, number 73. So these are the big ones. Let me make this even smaller. I think one we didn't talk about that was important was the actually 73. Did we miss that guy? Let's go back down to 73. This one I figured out today. You know, I didn't click on it is because I left it at the default. So the data out level, we don't change. On a lot of radios, like these SDR radios, I just maximize the data out level. And that's the audio volume coming out of the radio and into your computer, or in this case, the Digipi. So the volume of the audio coming out of the radio. I actually had this kicked up to 100, and I couldn't decode anything on PSK31. You know, the waterfall was all bright yellow. It was just really loud. So for some reason on this radio, don't max out the data out level, the audio volume coming out of the radio. It really does overdrive the software. FLDigi in this case. You know, maybe others won't be susceptible to that. But this is one default that you actually don't want to change on the Yaesu 991. So we can, let's see if we can start up, I might actually be able to demonstrate that. So let me go to the Digipi. Make sure you guys can see this. I can probably zoom this in a bit. I can actually demonstrate that data output thing. So the Digipi is in Digipeater mode right now. So I'm going to put it into FLDigi mode by clicking on right here. And the Digipi is going to reconfigure itself. It says FLDigi on the screen here. And then we click on the FLDigi link down at the bottom here. So we're actually going to listen a little bit and see how maybe some of these settings impact how FLDigi works here. So this is still in way up in a band we don't want to be in. I want to kick it down to, what band should we go to? I can go to 20 meters, and maybe there's some signal there, maybe there isn't. And I'm going to be on 14... 070, you can guess I'm doing PSK31, huh? You guys can tell. This is the calling frequency for PSK31. I've been hanging out here a lot. It's pretty cool. And let's see, do we got some guys here? I do see some lines. We're at 14070. Nah, there might be one right down here at the bottom. You can see like data start coming in here, hopefully, on the screen. I don't know if I can blow this up anymore. I wonder if I make this bigger for you guys. I'm gonna go like this. Use control and scroll wheel. This always works well on the browsers. So I do see a signal down here, but it's just not decoding right now. Yeah, it's well below the squelch. In fact, he just stopped. So one thing that I was messing with is the data out level, and that is something that has a big difference on the PSK31. So if I can kick it up to like 100 here, you see the waterfall just goes completely yellow. Now what you see on the waterfall doesn't have an impact. I mean, I could dial that yellow color out of the waterfall just by messing with these, the parameters right down here where it says -20 and 70. But this output, audio output level, data out level, menu item 073 genuinely has an impact on whether or not something is going to decode, specifically in PSK31. So I haven't messed with this on FT8. So now you can you see we kind of get a mix of yellow and blue there. You know, I can turn it down all the way and actually you'd get dark blue. That's probably going to be too low. I still don't see any signals there. So right at 50 seems to be the sweet spot. I was really hoping we'd get some decodes here, but it was like night and day. You know, I'd have it on 50, I'd be watching conversations go, and I'd crank it up to 100, and it just all go to gibberish. I could still see the signals, but maybe the signal to noise ratio wasn't there. So that is FM out level. Smash the camera here. All right, so that is the menu. I think we got everything we wanted to talk about there. I can make this big again. I don't know, maybe we'll see some signals here. We could play FLDigi and do some PSK31. I'll just kind of leave it this big. I'll keep it half an eye. Keep one eye on that, see what happens. All right, so that is the menu stuff that we need to mess with to get this to work. It will not work out of the box in digital mode, so don't even try it. It just leads to tears. I spent a lot of time messing with this, and honestly, this radio generates the most questions when it comes to digital modes. All right, so the other thing we need to think about is this F key for function key. I don't know what F stands for. Like I said, this radio I kind of love to hate. So all of these defaults will be wrong as well. A bunch of them will be wrong. The narrow wide one in particular. So first of all, the mode. Let's go back to mode. So when it needs to be in data upper sideband, that's always going to be your mode, okay? And when you change it to data upper sideband, you'll see the D-U show up here. Nothing's going to work unless it says D-U in the upper left-hand corner. Okay, so we're on data upper sideband. So that's all you really have to worry about in mode. Let's go back to the F key. And now each one of these usually needs to be changed. The narrow wide button will always be on narrow 300 as soon as you put it into data mode. No idea why, just is. So go ahead and click on this so it says wide. You can change that 3K width in another menu key. Of course, it's not on the screen. That'd be too convenient. And then generally speaking, if it's on this radio, turn it off. Turn it off. If you're doing digital modes, just turn it off. So the noise blanker's off, automatic gain control, definitely turn that off. If you need to, maybe put it on fast. I don't know. Hey, there's a signal on PSK31, but he's just transmitting nothing. He's not actually typing. Doesn't look like railroad tracks. All right, gain control off. Don't worry about any of this stuff. Generally speaking, IPO, this is important. It's usually on amp 1 by default, which is cool. I did experiment with this. You can use amp 2, and you can see how that yellow on the left screen, it's really kind of overdriven. And if you put it on IPO, which is basically no receiver amplifier, nothing works. You see, basically there's no signal in that waterfall. So make sure that's on amp 1. I got tangled. That burned about a half an hour right there messing with that. All right, so let's go to the next menu over here using the forward thing. Now, again, if it's on, turn it off. Notch, contour, DNR, DNF. I'll turn all this stuff off. The shift is off. One other thing you'll see is the width will be some weird default. You'll want to change this to 3000, okay? And, to change one of these, you just twist this knob. So I think it was like 500 hertz. That's what it was set to. Useless. Now look over on the waterfall. See what 500 hertz looks like? I mean, that's how narrow that band is. And then I'm going to turn it back up to 3000. Keep watching that waterfall. And you can see if we get the full dynamic width, or the full range of that channel, full 3000 hertz for a channel at 14070 megahertz. All right, so that is the width. Again, you're going to have to change that. I'm going to hit forward again. I think we got the important ones. I might turn the monitor on at about 30. That way you can hear your own transmission. So when you do transmit, you hear yourself. Everything else is off. That's the Vox stuff. Forward. All of these are grayed out because they're not useful in this mode and frequency. The meter I put on ALC, and we'll talk about that. The ALC is related to the DT gain. This is about how much audio you can drive into the modulator on this radio. And that's something you got to change all the time. We'll do it here in a second. Mic gain we don't care about because we're not using the microphone. DT gain, I set this at something sane. I think initially it's like 50. That's just completely unacceptable. You're basically blowing up the front of the transmitter with that much volume, audio volume going into modulation. So definitely change your DT gain down to about 5 or 7. You're going to need to experiment with that a little bit. We are getting, I noticed we're getting some signals on PSK31. People are talking. All right, the rest of this stuff we don't care about. Squelch is 0. Don't care. Everything's grayed out. All of this is like FM stuff we don't care about. Don't care. That's for swapping. So now we're kind of back at what I would call the home screen. I usually leave this screen up, when I'm transmitting, mostly because I don't have the more expensive 991A with the parametric or the visual scope on it. All right, so let's go back down to DT gain. This is one I mentioned before. I'm just going to do a quick test transmission. Actually, what I can do is I'm just going to say, what am I going to say? I'm going to say radio test KM6 LIW, and I'm going to do a transmit. Now when I do, I want you guys to watch the ALC meter, okay? ALC is this guy right here, and we don't want to see any ALC, maybe just a little, but just below the ALC reader, actually displaying something. That's where we want to be, and we're going to use the DT gain knob to manage our ALC. Okay, so I'm going to hit this. Now, while it's transmitting, you can't reassign this jog button. Okay, whatever we call this multi-function button. I don't know why. It's a Yaesu thing. So if you're doing a big long transmission, and maybe you pressed power while you're transmitting, this thing is stuck on power mode. You can only change the power. So click the DT gain first before you start your transmission. Thanks, Yaesu. And I'm going to start. Now we're going to watch the ALC, and I'm going to turn up the DT gain. See, ALC just went nuts. So I'm going to turn it down, 12, 11, 10, 8. I'm going to do another radio test. Maybe this one will be a little longer, and then I'm going to start transmitting that. We're at 33 watts. The ALC isn't there. I'm going to turn it up to 9. We have ALC, turn down to 8. We have no ALC, so I really like that. So between 8 and 9 is what you're going to want for automatic level control. And the DT gain is really what helps you manage that. Yeah, you can use the volume on your computer. That will have an impact too. You know, they'll work together. I think the audio volume output on the Digipi going to the radio is about 78%. So with that in mind, the DT gain for this mode, for this frequency, is in fact 8. That's what you want. Now the default for this is 50, which is insane. It's a complete overdrive. And so DT gain is something you're going to have to manage throughout the life of your radio for every mode. You know, if I was to go to a different frequency, the DT gain would have to be adjusted until I can get that ALC just right. So maybe this is just, you know, symptomatic of having a more analog type of system. I don't know, rather than a software-defined radio kind of system. I don't know. But this is something we work with on the Yaesu 991. So I can't think of anything else that, you know, is a real showstopper on this radio. I really do like this radio. Like I said at the beginning, I love to hate it, but it's really kind of cool to have your hands-on control to every fine detail. You can really get this dialed in really well for digital modes. And as you can see, you know, while we were here, it was decoding a bunch of PSK31 over here. All right, so that's the Yaesu 991. Let me know if you guys have one. It's tricky to configure. Actually, you know, before we go, let's go into FLDigi. I'm just going to go into the configure dialog, just so you guys can, for completeness, I guess. So I'm going to go into rig control, and I wish I could make this bigger. Maybe one more click bigger. Oh, that's hard to read. Okay, I'm going to rig control, and I'm going to go into hamlib, okay, and I'm going to do this checkbox. Let me make this smaller. Yeah, there we go. We don't need to see the radio. So I went to configure dialog. Let me start that again. Config dialog. And then I want rig control and then hamlib, all right? And that brings us to this screen. And I want you to click on use hamlib. There's a checkbox here. And then for your rig, I want you to select Yaesu FT-991. No surprise, right? But I'm going to say it out loud anyway. It's always going to use the first USB device. For whatever reason, when you plug in the USB cable to USB or serial port devices, if you're using Windows, it's going to be like COM4 and COM5. In Linux, it's going to be TTY USB 0 or 1 or 2. Always use the first COM port. That's the enhanced one. I have no idea why they enumerate 2. You can kind of get the other one to work. It's just glitchy. Like I said at the beginning, our baud rate is going to be 38,400. Okay, so that's about as fast as this radio will go. What else? I don't think we have to change anything else on this screen. I think there was like a test button. Hardware push to talk. We don't use that. So everything is done via hamlib here. I was thinking maybe there was an initialize button. There is an initialize button here. After you change your radio, this won't be grayed out. You'll click on this, and if everything's working communication-wise for USB, this will actually gray out. There's not a lot of other feedback in FLDigi. If it doesn't work, the initialize button you can press repeatedly, and it will continue to not work every time you press it until you get these values correct. All right, let me close this. We almost have it. God, it's just conditions are bizarre today. The solar flare index is off the scale, so frequencies that normally work aren't, and then frequencies that don't work usually, like the higher frequency ones, are working today. I was kind of hoping we'd see more chatter here, but there's some stuff. All right, so that is the Yaesu 991. Let me know if you love to hate it as well. I think it's a pretty cool radio. And don't even start doing digital modes until you make all of the changes that I just did in the radio, and of course all the changes in FLDigi. If you're using WSJTX, FT8 stuff, the configuration dialogues are very similar. You really need it in the baud rate, the dev TTY USB 0, and then you need to know the rig number. And make sure you've enabled hamlib. That's just a protocol. So each of these apps, kind of a wrapper protocol, so each of these apps can talk to different types of radios. Hamlib lets us do that. All right, we did it. That is the Yaesu FT-991. So lastly, definitely not least, thanking the patrons here at patreon.com/KM6LYW radio. This gets you access to early videos. It gets you access to early software. I'm a software engineer, if you guys haven't figured that out. So I do write a lot of software, including the Digipi image. So everything you've seen on the Digipi, you can get as a patron of KM6LYW Radio. It gives you access to the SD card. You can stick that in a Raspberry Pi, and you have access to every data mode that exists conveniently. on a small Raspberry Pi. That's a $15 computer, by the way, and then maybe like a $12 screen on there, assuming you can find them. I know there are supply chain issues. I hope we will look back on them, this video, fondly and just laugh. Like, remember when there were supply chain issues and you couldn't buy Raspberry Pis? I hope. All right, Fu, Michael, Brian, Jake, Jason, Steve, Christopher, Simon, Bill Higgins. Is William or Bill? Ian, Jim, Brad. Thank you so much, guys. I'm just going to scroll through these really quick. There's just... I almost said there's too many patrons, right? This helps me out a lot, not just being part of the channel here, but you guys give me so much feedback and encouragement for building the Digipi and really, dialing that in, so make it so anyone can use this. Chris, Wayne, Domingo, Ronald, Brad, Giovanni, David, Jared, Keith, Peter, Ronald, John, we need your last name again. John Lamb and John. Clayton, thank you. Wolfgang, Dale, I don't know this character set here. I know we exchanged emails though. I'm going to remember your name one of these programs here. Jurgen, thank you guys. John, Rodrigo, Dale, Timothy, Robin, Chris. Hey, thanks so much. Let me know if you use the Yaesu 991. This has kind of been a radio spotlight, the Yaesu 991. Hey, my name's Craig. I'm KM6LYW Radio, and I'm clear.